Hi folks, it's the next video in the series on Latin literature, Romans in the Countryside. Today we're going to be having a look at Livy and the story of Cincinnatus, the Roman statesman who's famous for being called from the plough, save Rome and basically go back to his farm. So we've looked at Cicero, we've looked at Horace, and we're moving on to Livy chronologically. Okay, so he's writing later than Cicero and Horace. That doesn't mean that Cincinnatus' story was a new one. Like Livy's history has a really big scope. He's talking about a story that Cicero and Horace probably already familiar with when they're writing. And so for you do now task, I've put three phrases, one from Livy, which we'll look at today, one from Cicero, which we looked at in the first video, and one from Horace. So if you want to pause the video now and translate these, they'll highlight a theme. Okay, so if you've paused the video and had a chance to translate, I'm going to whip through the answers. We've got circum eraret, circum eraret, whether he was at the plough. And this is because Livy's doing a historical device called hedging. So whether he was doing this or that, we all agree that he was doing some sort of farming activity. That's what we're going to find Livy saying today. And this is because Livy's a historian. So Cicero's writing a law court speech, and we know that he directs a lot of what he says to the judges, and he writes about their prejudices about country life. Horace is a poet, so he idealises life in the countryside quite a lot. And Livy's a historian, so he's hedging his bets. He wasn't alive when Cincinnatus was called from the plough, so he's saying it might have been this and it might have been that. And that's quite natural for Livy because he's a historian who wasn't there at the time. Cum aberratio arcesebantur. So when men or people, because we've got nt, when men were called aberratio from the plough. Okay, so Cicero highlights the Cincinnatus story without really naming him at the beginning of the law court speech we looked at when we were looking at traditional values with Cicero. You know, he says if you were born when men were called from the plough, all your prejudices about people from the countryside would seem really, really foolish. And the last one, paterna rora bobus exercet suis. So this is when Horace is speaking about the lucky man, beatus ille, blessed is he, who procul negotis, far from business, is able to plough his own farm that he inherited from his ancestors. So paterna rora bobus exercet suis idealises being a self-sufficient farmer and not being in debt to anybody. So it's a theme that we've seen through the text we've already looked at, and it's important to start creating these comparisons as part of your revision, because in the literature paper you're going to be asked about specific sources and specific texts, and we'll prepare for that now. But in the essay question you'll have a big theme, and you'll be asked to pull evidence that might be on the paper, but it might be beyond the paper. It might be something you're expected to remember from what you've seen and learned on this unit. So using the knowledge organisers I've made for you, doing these sort of do now tasks is a really important part of your revision. So if we look at the start of the Cincinnatus story, we have vis sabinorum ingens prope ad moenia urbis in festa populatione venit. A huge force of Sabines. So vis sabinorum is a huge force of Sabines with terrible devastation came almost to the walls of the city. So it's run over the line a little bit in yellow. Ad moenia urbis are the walls of the city. Okay, the fields were laid waste, foedati agri. The city was struck with terror. Terror injectis urbi est. Okay, so again we're running just over the lines because of the word order. So when we get to tanta trepidatio fuit, there was such a great panic. Quantasi urbem, as if the enemy were besieging, so obsiderent the city, urbem, non castra, not the camp. So the word order is really hard to pin back to the English. Obsiderent, were besieging, and here it's in the subjunctive, because it's as if, as though. It's not actually happening, it's something that may, might, could or should happen, as if this was happening. And the word if is over here, it's si. All of this is vocabulary we know. Urbem, city, castra, camp, hostes, enemies. And over here, civibus, these are our citizens. We know all of this vocabulary from the language paper. Itaque civibus, therefore the citizens, dictatorem dici placuit, qui rem percursem restitueret. And again, we've got another subjunctive. decided that a dictator should be appointed. This is the exam board translation. Literally, it was pleasing to them, placuit, that a dictator, dictatorem, should be appointed, dici, passive infinitive, to be appointed, to restore the shattered state, restituere, that he might restore. So here it looks like an infinitive, to restore, but it's a subjunctive up here. Who would, may or might restore, rem per culsam, the shattered state. So we've got a few subjunctives. The way to spot them, obsidere, restituere, is look, they've got re, and this is because it's basically an infinitive, to verb, with a personal ending shoved on the end. Et Lucius, and Lucius, Quinctius Cincinnatus consensu omnium dicitor. Quinctius Cincinnatus was chosen by the consent of all. Consensu, we use the word consensus today, so we know that's the consent. Omnium is of all. Okay, so he's painting a picture of a really kind of fraught state, and he's saying that people are so worried that it's as if the city itself is being taken. So there's this contrast right up at the top with city and countryside. Urbis infesta, foedati agri. You might be asked on an essay question to compare city life and country life. That would be a really obvious, big thematic essay question. And you can actually do it using the first couple of lines here. Eduqas on the paper seem to say they're happy with English quotations. So you don't have to memorise Latin particularly. But if you've got Latin on the paper, you may as well make use of it. And it's all about showing that you know the text really, really well. So maybe on one of the later videos, I'll show you the mark scheme and I'll show you some of the sample questions from other themes that they've had, because this is the first time this theme has run this year, this Romans in the countryside theme. Okay. Spes unica imperii populi Romani. This is where it gets really dramatic. The one hope of the power of the Roman people. And here, imperii populi Romani, they've all got the same word ending, right? And part of that's because of the case, but there's also a device, you might not have heard of it in English literature. It's called homoi teleuton. HOMOITELEUTON. We see it in Latin, we see it in Greek as well, because the word endings change the meaning. But it connects ideas together, and it also adds a bit of emphasis because you're getting a repeated sound. But unlike alliteration and assonance, it's coming at the end. Imperii populi Romani. The power, imperii populi, of the people, Romani, of Rome. Okay. And here it's quite dramatic because he's presented as the only saviour. So even though Cincinnatus is writing a history, it's very, very dramatised. Even though Livy is writing this history, it's very, very dramatised, and Cincinnatus is presented as a hero. Okay, the word order is quite tricky to follow. So Quinctius trans Tiberium, and here we're looking at across the Tiber. So Livy starts to link Cincinnatus's farm to the geography of Rome a little bit. Quinctius trans Tiberium contra eum ipsum locum ubi nunc navaria sunt. So he cultivated a farm of 4 acres, and that is over here. This is quatuor iugarum collebat. So we've had to change the word order around quite a bit. Quatuor is 4, iugarum collebat, cultivated, collebat is he was farming. Agrum is farm or field, and iugarum is like the unit of measurement here. Okay. Which are now the Quinctian meadows. So it's named after him. So Quinctius is up here, across the Tiber, trans Tiberium. So he's linking Cincinnatus's farm to the geography of Rome. There, opposite the very place where the docks now are. Okay. Ibi obligatis sur fossem foidiens. This is where we get whether he was doing this, whether he was doing that. Sur. So sur fossem foidiens palae inixus, whether leaning on a stake while digging a ditch. Sur cum eraret, or while ploughing. So the important thing is it's the manual labour. Okay, people don't know what he was doing exactly, but opericete id quod constat, but it is certain, agresti intentus, that he is engrossed in a farming task. Certainly, as is generally accepted, engrossed in some farming. Agresti is farming here. Okay, so here, again, we're being reminded that Livy's a historian. Some people say this, some people say that, but generally we agree that he's farming. After greetings had been given, that's simply salute data. Okay. Invicem reditaque, and greetings were exchanged. Rogatus est ut togatus mandata senatus. So again, a lot of homo teluton, a lot of really similar endings. In turn, invicem reditaque, and responded to. So this is them exchanging greetings. He was asked, rogatus est, perfect passive, by the envoys to listen to the commands of the Senate. So here, ut and audire, he was asked to do something. We have an indirect command introduced by ut, so we have ut plus the subjunctive. Literally, he was asked so that he might listen to. But in English, we would say he was asked to listen to mandata, the commands of the Senate. Bewildered, admiratus. So admiratus gives us the word admiring. If you're admiring something, you're amazed by it. So we could say he's bewildered or he's amazed. And he is rogitansque, asking. Rogitans, like interrogate. Satin salve, is everything all right? And then he ordered is actually ubet. It's down here. The reason ubet is in the present tense is because this is the historic present, and Livy uses that to make the story more vivid. So it's like he orders his wife to do this. The exam board have put it in the past tense just because it's a history, but it's something that Livy uses as a device to make the story more vivid and exciting. So he ordered his wife to bring his toga quickly from their cottage. Etugorio is a small cottage, so he's being presented as very humble again. Quasimo, as soon as, like simultaneously. So as soon as he stepped forward and dressed in it, okay, now here procesi is he stepped forward. Velatus is like veiled or covered himself in it, okay. The dust and sweat is actually on the previous line, so the word order is a bit tricky. So pulvere, as in to pulverize something, is your dust, and sudorea, presume, is sweat, okay. The envoys congratulating him, so consalutant and legati is the envoys congratulating him. They hailed him as a dictator, so gratulantes, sorry, is congratulating, consalutant is hailing him. In urbem vocant, they call him into the city. Again, it's the historic present, so the examples put called. You don't need to stress about that from a grammar point of view, but you can say that Livy's making the story more vivid. They call him into the city, exponent, and they explain qui terrosit, what a terror there was in exercitu, in the army. Sit, over here, is actually the subjunctive again, sim, sis, sit, and it's because they're saying it, it's indirect speech, so they're saying what a terror there is or what a terror there might be in the army. Okay, so if we think about key themes then, there's quite a few in the Cincinnatus story, okay? So, there we go. Spes unica imperi populi Romani. The idea of the countryside being linked to the present state of Rome and to how amazing Rome is. And we saw this in Cicero when Cicero was saying from tiny humble beginnings there was a flourishing, a magnificent republic. And he uses two pairings to compare how it was to how it is. And we see this here with Livy describing Cincinnatus as the only hope of the power of Rome. Imperii is power. And it gives us words like imperator, like emperor, and imperium, like empire. So it's a much more like important word for them, I suppose. Cultivated a farm of 4 acres, which are now called the Quinctian Meadows. Bringing his toga quickly from their cottage. So this idea that he's being called to action, and we saw that in the Do Now with Cicero when we were thinking about people being called from the plough. Stepped forward and dressed in it after wiping off the dust and sweat. So again, this idea of hard work and the countryside being a place of hard work. So the sorts of themes you could be expecting are the Romans idealising the countryside as part of their humble beginnings. The Romans presenting the countryside as a place of hard work but good character. And the Romans presenting people in the countryside to have stronger values and better values. So after Cincinnatus helps, he actually goes back to his farm, and that is what he's really, really famous for. He doesn't take power for himself and for personal advantage. And we've thought about that when we were looking at Cicero in traditional values. We've thought about it when we looked at Horace's changing face of the countryside, and he talks about how people who come from the city to the countryside don't embrace those values. They build mega mansions, they don't have farms, they just have pleasure gardens, and they're just idle city people in the countryside. Okay, so we've got a couple more authors to go, but I would really think about using those knowledge organisers and creating mind maps to help you with the essay questions as well.